Hello world, Shelly here, and I'm coming at you sans sleeves so that we can do a tattoo story time. I guess I've got 15 tattoos if you count like a few of the groups of them as single tattoos. I've been getting tattooed since I was 19 years old. That's when I got my first one. The first tattoo I ever got was this tattoo of Chim Chim the monkey, and it's got the Nirvana logo above it. This was a recreation of a drawing that Kurt Cobain had done of Chim Chim the monkey with explosives on his back. And the way the story went, that as I had read it in some rock magazine at the time, was that Kurt had drawn this on a sticker and he gave it to Courtney Love the first time they met. I thought that was so romantic, and so that was the very first tattoo that I ever got. It was the day before Christmas Eve when I was 19 years old, and my high school, early college best friend and I were bored, and so we decided that the day after Christmas we were going to take a road trip. We were living around Chicago, and we decided to drive down to Athens, Georgia, because that's where REM was from, and we thought maybe we would run into Michael Stipe or someone from REM, and that would be cool. And we also figured we would get our first tattoos. And we found a place in Athens called Midnight Iguana Tattooing. It was right across from the little Holiday Inn hotel that we were staying at. I mean, downtown Athens at the time, maybe it still is, was like a 6 block by 6 block square. And we were talking to the woman at the front desk at the tattoo parlor, asking her, like, what are we getting into? Does this hurt? Like, what's going to happen? And she said, "Have you ever been scratched by a cat?" And I said, "Oh yeah, every day. I've had cats all my life." And she said, "Well, it doesn't feel anything like that, but that's about the same quantity of pain that you'll be in, just over a longer period of time." And so I was like, I can take that. And as it turns out, that was the most perfect way to explain it, because that's kind of how I feel about tattoos. I think it's more annoying to get a tattoo than painful. Now, granted, I've never had one on my rib cage or on any of the super, super painful areas to get a tattoo. I've mainly stuck to the arms, the legs, the back, that kind of thing. But I thought that was a very good explanation. But, I only have one tattoo that I don't necessarily like, and it'll be the second one I talk about. But I don't regret it. I feel like tattoos, to me, are like, it's the sum of all histories. They all mark a certain time in my life. They mark a certain event or a certain thing I was going through, or a certain accomplishment, or a certain love of my life, in terms of, like, I have a couple Dave Matthews tattoos, like, not people. Don't put your boyfriends and your husbands. None of that is forever, at least in my experience. But I don't regret having, the older ones that I'm not necessarily into those things anymore, because they marked a time in my life and they remind me of that time in my life. And I do put a lot of thought into before I ink something on me permanently. So I like having this sort of historical roadmap of my life to look at whenever I feel like it. So anyway, that's kind of how I look at tattoos in general. The second tattoo is one that, not that I regret, but that, I just don't have an affinity for it the way I did when I first got it. I tend to lie to people about what it is. I tell people that it's a spooky tree from The Wizard of Oz. In reality, it is a spooky tree from the liner notes of the Marilyn Manson album, Portrait of an American Family. And not that I don't like any of that. Like, I don't follow Marilyn Manson anymore. I don't really listen to any of the music anymore, but I wouldn't get rid of it, because it's who I was at the time. And it was a very short-lived period of time that was my thing. And I don't feel that I identify with that version of myself anymore, but it's there. It was part of my life. I have memories attached to it. And so that tattoo was one of my friends from high school and college. His name was Dusty. It still is Dusty. Sorry, dog. I don't think Dusty watches my videos, but he's still alive and kicking and doing great. And you should all go to his brewery. It is in Tinley Park, Illinois. He's one of the brewers there. I'll leave it on screen here because he makes awesome beer. At least that's what I hear from people that drink beer. I drink wine. But Dusty and I drove out to the East Coast to visit another friend of ours, and while we were there, we all decided to get tattoos, and that is the tattoo that I got. Yeah, that's the spooky tree, and we're just gonna call it a spooky tree. I also had my astrological sign tattooed on my body. I'm a Libra, born in October, and so the scales are my astrological symbol. And for a while, I say a while, but it was probably 10 years, I was super into astrology, not necessarily horoscopes, but I was calculating birth charts from scratch, the position of all the planets when people were born, and where was the moon rising, where was the sun rising. I was mapping it all out and doing all the math by hand. I was really, really into birth charts. And so I got Libra, and that is on my leg. I got that tattoo in Paducah, Kentucky. We had a family vacation that we used to go on annually. When I was 2 years old, it was the very first family vacation that my mom and dad and I went on before my brother was born. And when I was a teenager, I think I was 18, we decided to start going back to that resort so that we could kind of commemorate the first family vacation we had ever had. And we went back for several years after at that point. And one of those years, I went and got that tattoo. My brother got the Pearl Jam Stickman tattoo, and that's what that reminds me of. Next, I've got a goldfish tattoo on my back. And the reason I have a goldfish on my back is because my dad was a fisherman, but his favorite fish to catch was bass. And my dad passed away in the year 2000. I was in my early 20s, and so I wanted to get a fish to honor my dad's memory, but there was no way on God's green earth that I was going to put a bass on my body. No, they're not cute. Not cute. So I decided to get a goldfish. So we were on a family vacation in Hawaii, and I think it was 2003 maybe? We were in Hawaii, and I scheduled an appointment with the tattoo parlor there, and they had drawn up this goldfish for me, and they drew the goldfish as a female goldfish. I had wanted a male goldfish, but I was still young, and I still had not found my voice. I still don't like conflict, but I will speak up now for something like this. It took me two bad tattoos, not bad, but two tattoos that weren't the way I wanted them before I learned to just speak up, because I did not tell them that I wanted a male goldfish. I let them tattoo this female goldfish on me, and it has bugged me ever since. I just wanted it to be a boy goldfish. I didn't want a girl goldfish. It was for my dad. But I have a girl goldfish on my back, and that is where that one came from. Then I got a couple of Dave Matthews Band tattoos. So somewhere around 2003, I started going to Dave Matthews Band shows. I'd always listened to them on the radio through the 90s and whatnot, but early 2000s is when I got really, really into them, and the Fire Dancer is the Dave Matthews kind of logo, and the coffee ring symbol is from one of their album covers, and so I had the Fire Dancer over these coffee rings. And this is another example where I did not speak up. So the artist had drawn this tattoo sketch for me, and he didn't make the coffee rings perfectly round. Now, you know how a coffee cup, the bottom is perfectly round. And if your coffee cup leaves a stain of coffee rings, it's going to be round with some blobs of liquid because the bottom of the cup is round. Well, he made the one ring sort of smushed in on the side, which is impossible because the coffee cup would not be smushed in on the side. And I did not correct him. And he did the tattoo with the smushed in ring, and it has bothered me ever since. And that was the last straw. I was like, why do I not open my mouth and make them fix it? Because this is on my body for the rest of my life. So if I have any lessons to give you from this, make sure that thing is exactly what you want before they start working on you, because you will regret it and it will bug you forever and ever and ever. But I got that tattoo in Indianapolis, and I was actually down there for a Dave Matthews Band show at Deer Creek, and somewhere in the mid-2000s. Don't remember exactly when, but that is that one. I also have a sketch of Dave Matthews playing the guitar, And this, I was just going for the outline of him in one of his famous, like, dancing poses with colorful, like, 80s reminiscent, colors behind him. And this artist freehanded all of that, and I just trusted him. I had no idea what he was going to do. He was an amazing artist. He was in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and sadly, he passed away a couple years ago. I think he had pancreatic cancer. He was only in his early 30s, and it was a total bummer because he had a wife and a kid, and he was an amazing artist, an award-winning artist, and I loved his work, and I wish I had gotten back to have him do more work, but I never did, and that was that. But this one, the one bad thing about this tattoo is that I wasn't paying attention, and he asked me if I wanted it flipped so it would be facing the other way on my leg, and I said, yeah, that'd be fine, but I didn't think it through because flipping the image made Dave left-handed. Dave is not left-handed, but on my leg he's left-handed, but he's not left-handed. So that was just my mistake, and that was that one. But I highly recommend the Jack Brown's Tattoo Parlor in Fredericksburg, Virginia. There were awesome artists there, and I will have more work done for them eventually at some point in time. My artist is no longer there, but they had fantastic work there, excellent artists, and they do a lot of tattooing for charity and things like that, so thumbs up Jack Brown's. Also in Virginia, I was attending the annual guild conference. I belong to a guild called the Syndicate, and they have a conference every year, and me and another syndicate member went and got tattoos up in Northern Virginia. The shop isn't there anymore, but that's this one here. It is an owl, and the owl's holding a flag with the logo and our call sign LLTS, Long Live the Syndicate. And people will say, what does an owl have to do with the Syndicate? Absolutely nothing. I just like owls, and so I combined it, and I thought it was cute, and I still think it's cute. Love my little owl. But that was that one. And speaking of the game, I play the game Ultima Online, and I've been playing that game for 20 years now, and a few years back at the same conference that happens every year, there were 4 of us that decided to go get matching tattoos of the icon from one of the magic spells in the magic spell book. If you are a magician in the game, you can cast E-Bolt, or I think it's Electric Bolt, I don't know, just E-Bolt. And it's like a lightning symbol, and so 4 of us got the E-Bolt symbol tattooed on us. We've got matching tattoos, and that's just the game that I play. Then I've got the Little Red Bird, which actually was just the outline of a bird, but there's a song by Dave Matthews called Little Red Bird, and I love that song, and I love birds. And the liner notes for the disc that song came on had this little bird, and so I went on a random day. I think I was again in Northern Virginia for some kind of guild activity, and I got the bird tattooed on my inner arm, and this was the very first tattoo that was kind of breaching the uncoverable space, so to speak. All my other tattoos could be easily covered up by a t-shirt or by wearing pants, and this one was on the underside of my wrist, but it was on my lower arm, my lower forearm, so it was the first sort of visible tattoo that I had gotten. Then I was in Las Vegas, and a friend of mine wanted to get a tattoo, and she hadn't had a tattoo before, so it was her first, and she was nervous, so I was like, I'll get one too, and you can see how it goes before you actually have to do it, and you can watch it happen, right? So that's my triquetra that I have right here on my wrist, along with my do no harm, because that's kind of my life motto. And it was originally black and gray, it was not colored in, and so I got that, and this was actually at the tattoo parlor. I'll have to look up the name of it, but it's, if anyone watched or watches the Ink Master, that tattoo show on Spike TV, the artist that was on it a couple years ago, Sausage, this was the shop that Sausage worked at. Now, this was not done by him or any of the guys that were on that show. Why is there a fly in here? It was not done by any of them, but it was the shop that he worked at in Las Vegas, so I paid way too much money for it. But the line work is absolutely gorgeous. They did a fantastic job on it. Of course, since I was in Vegas, and Vegas is just a nasty, dirty place, it's the only tattoo I had that ever, like, scabbed so bad that I pulled ink out of it when it healed. So that was a bummer, but I've since had it touched up. But that's the triquetra, and I'm third generation American. My great grandparents are from Ireland, and my grandparents on my mom's side and my mom are 100% Irish, so I'm half Irish, and so that's kind of where my interest in, Irish and Celtic symbolism comes from. Then I had the birds on my forearms done. Now, it was just the birds, the outlines of the birds, and they were not in color. They were originally black and gray, because I was originally going to keep this arm all black and gray. But I had the birds drawn in, and I had them done here in Harrisonburg at a really great shop called Steelheart Tattoo. Jay is the artist there, and I loved the birds. I wanted the inspiration that I gave him to draw them up was I asked for birds that were reminiscent of the birds from the logo or the intro of the Partridge Family. Do any of you know that show or remember that show? I loved that show, and I loved those cute little birds. So these birds are kind of just cartoon birds. They're not really real birds, but I guess they're partridges, kind of, but not realistically. Like, they're illustrated partridges, kind of. Yeah. So I had the birds done maybe 5 years ago now, and that was really the first time breaching the skin of everyday visible. Everyone can see them all the time because I've always got short sleeves on at least half of the year. And that was a big kind of turning point for me, because you can have tattoos, but when you have tattoos that are visible all the time, it's a little bit different, because you're not really hiding them, and you're making a statement that this is who I am all the time. Like, this, it's out there. And within the first couple weeks of having that done, I went back and forth in my head thinking, did I make a mistake? Because I noticed immediately that some people, not most people, just a few people, but everywhere I went, somebody looked at me differently. And it could have been in my head because I was kind of paranoid about having made that bold change. But now that I've had them visible for several years now, there are some people that look at you differently, or treat you differently, or think you're a criminal, or don't want to associate with you if you've got visible tattoos. And that's fine. That's your thing. If that's your thing, that's your thing. You're probably not watching me if that's your thing, your thing, because my arm tattoos are almost always visible. But it's definitely something that if you're thinking about getting tattoos and you haven't had them before, or you haven't had visible ones before, definitely think through just that there might be a shift in how certain people perceive you or react to you or treat you if they don't already know you. It was a shift in how I had to sort of think about the world around me a little bit. It became something that I was so glad that I did, because it is the truest version of me. It is what I want. It is so much of what I want. It's how I want to look. It is how I want to portray myself. It is the artwork that I want to make visible to the world. And I feel like a more true version of myself is out in the world now that my tattoos aren't hidden. They're out there, they're everywhere. And it became a confidence building piece of me, and something that I felt I was sharing a more authentic version of myself with the outside world. So that's just what my experience was. So I had the birds, and there's several of them, done in black and white, black and gray, on my arm. And I had it like that for several years. And then I decided that I was going to color my arm in. because I'm the one that sees this thing every single day, and I wanted color. Not that I didn't like it in black and gray, but I felt like a colorful expression was more me than anything. So the next tattoo that I got was this feather. It's a great horned owl feather, and underneath it I have the name Briscoe. It's a bird that I worked with at the Wildlife Center of Virginia. I volunteer there as an outreach educator, and I work with the education animals, primarily the hawks and the owls. I also work with the turtles and the snakes. And Briscoe was near and dear to my heart. He taught me a form of courage and respect, and sort of this way of respecting wildlife that I always respected nature and wildlife, but to truly respect that this bird really could have hurt me at any time, and there's not any real reason that he didn't, except that I respected his boundaries and then he respected mine. And yes, I'm anthropomorphizing him a bit, but it was a really big, sort of impactful experience for me to work with this bird for a few years. And a couple of summers ago, he passed away, and it was jarring to me. It still upsets me. I still think of him all the time, and so I wanted to sort of memorialize him in a tattoo, and so I have a great horned owl feather and his name, Briscoe. And it still makes me sad to think about him, because he had a rough life, that bird. It really affected me, and so I memorialized him with a great horned owl feather. That was the first tattoo I got in color on this arm. Now, of course, it's only brown and sort of beige, but I got it in color with the intention of coloring in the rest of my arm. So then last summer, I was in Ireland preparing for the study abroad that I just got back from, visiting all the sites and seeing everything. And while I was there, I had researched some tattoo parlors, and I went to a place called AWOL Tattoo in Galway in Ireland. Fantastic, best shop ever. I will go there for the rest of my life. But they had this visiting artist. His name was Carlos. I will link his Instagram down below. And I walked in and I asked them, last minute, I said, I'm going to be here for about a week. Is there any way that you can fill in the rest of my arm and color it in? And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to fill it in with. And the tattoo artist that was there at the time, they were totally booked, of course, because they're a pretty high profile shop there. But there was this guy sitting on the couch, and I had just assumed that he was there for, waiting to get a tattoo. And so he stood up and said, "What are you looking to get done?" And so I told him briefly, and he's like, "Well, I was supposed to go back to Dublin tomorrow, but if you want to come in, I'll delay my trip another day, and I'll do your tattoo." And so he was a visiting artist there that was popping around Ireland, staying at different shops for a week here, a week there. And it turns out he does that every summer. He was there when I was just there this past month, but I missed him. But his work was amazing. And so the next day I came in, and he had drawn up cherry blossoms and cherry blossom petals. And, when he had said cherry blossoms, I thought to myself, oh, that's so cliche. But the more I thought about it, when I moved to the East Coast again, this is my second time living out east from Chicago, and I've been here just about 7 years. In a couple weeks, it'll be 7 years ago that I moved here. And my nearest big city is Washington, D.C., and the cherry blossoms are such a huge deal up there, and I'm obsessed with them. They're beautiful. I didn't go see them this year, but I've seen them a few times since I've been here every spring, and it's just, I love winter turning into spring and winter going away. So the cherry blossoms are a big deal, and the more I thought about it, I thought, that's pretty fitting. I think that's the right thing. And I wanted it traditional style. He happened to be a traditional style expert, and it turned out freaking amazing. So he drew all of the flowers and the cherry blossoms and all of the shading, and then he colored in everything else. So he colored in my birds, and he colored in the triquetra. And I'm so in love with this arm. I really, it's exactly what I wanted, even though I didn't know exactly what I wanted. And it's perfect, and I love it. And that made me happy. So I knew then that when I would come back for my next big piece, it was going to be at AWOL Tattoo in Ireland. So I looked through the portfolios of everyone at AWOL, and what I wanted, and I've wanted for several years since I had been volunteering at the Wildlife Center, was a portrait of my favorite owl ever. His name is Quinn. He is a one-eyed great horned owl, and he's still alive. Please stay alive forever, Quinn. I am just going to die if you die. But I knew I wanted a portrait. I knew it had to be a photorealistic portrait. I didn't want an illustrated piece. I wanted a photorealistic portrait of Quinn, the great horned owl. And as it turns out, there's a portrait specialist who has some amazing animal portraits at AWOL Tattoo. His name is Tad Kelly, and I enlisted him to do my owl portrait of Quinn, and it turned out so much better than I even could have imagined. I had sent him a couple reference photos, and he did my Quinn portrait, and oh my god, I can't even tell you guys. It brings tears to my eyes. It is exactly like it is Quinn. Quinn is on my arm, like literally on my arm. He captured his personality. He captured his quirky, goofy face. He got his missing eye. I could not be happier at all with the way this turned out. I am so in love with this piece, and it took about 5.5 hours. It healed faster than any tattoo I've ever had in my life. I don't know if it was because it was just meant to be. Tad did an amazing job. He has such a light hand in terms of just making everything as least painful as possible. I cannot say enough good things about AWOL. I will be going there for every tattoo that I get. All my big pieces, it's going to be Tad at AWOL, and that's just where I'm going to get them done. Also, while I was in Ireland, the students that I was on the study abroad with, a few of them wanted to get tattoos, and so of course I'll go with you. And I had a little bit added, a little 5-minute tattoo added to my arm here, and I had Raise Hell added to my wrist on the underside. And the story behind that is I've been working in academia for almost 20 years now, teaching higher education. And I worked in private schools for a few years. I had earned tenure at the first college I taught at and spent 10 years there. And then I left and came to Virginia and started the tenure process all over again. If you work in academia, you probably know the horrors of the tenure process. And some of the things that I've gone through in the last few years work-wise in order to hopefully earn tenure. I go up for tenure this October, so please keep your fingers crossed and send any good vibes that you've got if you can spare them, because I will go up for tenure in October. And I had told myself for several years now that to counterbalance my do no harm, I wanted to remind myself to raise hell, because I avoid conflict at almost all costs, and it's not good. I need to stand up for what's right when it is right to stand up for those things. And so that was kind of how I planned to reward myself for earning tenure. But as it turned out, life just kept coming at me, and I needed to remind myself sooner. And so when I was in Ireland, I got my Raise Hell on the underside of my wrist to remind myself to stay strong, to open my mouth when I should open my mouth, to stick up for the underdog, to speak up when I need to speak up, to fight for the things that are right, that I believe in. And it's really just my reminder to not be a bystander, to act on the things that are important to me, even if I have to raise my voice and cause conflict to do that. So that is where Raise Hell came from, and it's my own little reminder on the underside of my wrist. And I think that's all of my tattoos. I think that's all of them. There you have it. Tattoo stories. Do you guys have ink? What do you got? If you've got it, post it. Tell me about it. If you've got pictures, put them on your Instagram and give me a link. I would love to check them out. Tattoos are, I'm never going to stop getting them. I'm going to get them my whole life. So Let me know what you've got. Let me know if any of this resonates with you guys. Let me know what you think of tattoos. Love them, hate them? Let's talk about it. Leave me some comments down below. Give me a thumbs up if you like these kinds of storytelling videos. What else do you want to hear stories about? Let me know. Let me know in the comments. I'll tell you some stories. Clearly, I can talk. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to geek out over tattoos with me. I appreciate it as always, and I hope you guys all have an awesome day or night wherever you are in the world. Take care of each other. Bye-bye.